Hey everyone, my name's Matt Schober, and I am with the NOBE Alumni Board. I am the vice president, one of the vice presidents, that is. And today you have joined a webinar about um, engineering in the corporate world. And so today I'm happy to announce we have Will Siegel with us, who's currently working at Target. Thanks for joining, Will.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I used to be in NOBE with Will. It was a few years ago now. Let's see, you've been at Target now about 3.5 years, Will, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, so I graduated in 2014, and I think Will graduated from in 2015 from the University of Minnesota.
hmm
I was studying mechanical engineering at the time. What were you studying, Will?
I studied material science and engineering and chemistry.
That's right. That's right. Yep. So I want to give a brief overview of kind of what I do on the alumni board before we have Will kick it off. Just for everyone's knowledge, because I'm not sure if everyone knows kind of what the alumni board is about in NOBE. But we kind of serve as a liaison with the national board to kind of provide some input and to also connect with the broader alumni within NOBE. So we've been very valuable in, kind of providing our input and actually kind of kicking off some of these webinars as well. Was kind of a brainchild that came out of the alumni board. So a little bit more about Will. He's in product safety and quality assurance at Target. He's been working on many different product types, from sandwich bags to storage furniture to toys and children's products. As part of his role, what he's doing is he's writing testing protocols, reviewing factory quality assessments, and communicating daily with internal teams and vendors. And he's had the chance to travel to Asia about 4 times already. So he's been to countries such as China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And as I mentioned, he was a member of NOBE at University of Minnesota. He was there for 3.5 years, and he was treasurer, and then he was also the president for 1 year. As I said, he's very excited to be here. Um, Thank you for joining this call, Will. I know it's exciting times at Target as well, in terms of the retail landscape, and there's lots of changes going on, as everyone is aware.
hmm
But we'd also like to learn more about you and kind of how you have found, engineering to work in the corporate world at a company such as Target. So with that, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off, Will. Maybe you had some additional info you wanted to start with.
Yeah,
And then I believe at the end, maybe we could reserve some time for questions or something like that if people wanted to type some in the chat box. So go ahead,
yeah,
Will. Thanks.
perfect. Thanks, Matt, for the intro. Hello, everyone. My name is Will. As Matt mentioned, I work at Target Corporate in Minneapolis here as a quality assurance engineer, product safety quality assurance engineer. I was in NOBE for 3.5 years. I thought a couple things I could start off with are one, just sort of how NOBE's been valuable for me in helping me work my way to the role that I'm in today, and then to just talk a little bit about uh, Target as a company and a little bit about like where it fits in with Amazon and where it fits in with Walmart and that sort of thing, and sort of like what the high level strategy is too. And with that too, I'll preface that anything I say is Will thoughts, not Target thoughts. So it's no big corporate stances tonight. So talking a little bit about why how NOBE has helped me sort of in my development, and like when I started looking for a job out of school and all that, um, is one, it was just great to have that exposure to people who are like-minded to everyone here, and that they believe that there is value in bringing business and engineering together, because I know you probably hear it all the time from everybody, at your chapter meetings and like from the alumni board, that in the corporate world that business and engineering are one and the same. They work together every day, but it's completely true. And just understanding that even helped me find, sort of what niche I wanted to go into in engineering, because I was always really interested in engineering from a technical piece. But when I was, in high school and all that, I was really interested in business too. So NOBE was great to help bring those two worlds together, and then at the same time help me stay involved in with that mindset. So I ended up at a place like Target where I can be an engineer, but I still, I'll get into some of these points later in the webinar, but get to do things like work on cross-functional teams with like sourcing of products and like merchandising and all those sorts of things. I still get to be exposed to that, and work with that daily on those teams with those teams, but I'm still in my sort of core technical role as one of the technical sort of SMEs, subject matter experts on that cross-functional team. In addition to that, the mindset just of keeping business and engineering close together and intertwined like they really are. The other thing I think was really helpful was just the networking piece. Networking, it's one of those buzzwords, you know, that everyone's like, oh, you got to network, you have to go at all these things, you got to send your resume out, have your LinkedIn updated. And those things honestly are really helpful and beneficial. And like as you are, like I think that everyone here is taking a great step into calling into something like this. Because even though you're not directly talking to like the other members and other chapters, you know, you're participating in something where you're bringing yourself outside of your comfort zone and you're putting yourself out there to really understand what's going on outside of your bubble. Because I know it's so easy just to end up, you know, like for me, like at the University of Minnesota, like in material science, like you can get your bubble smaller and smaller. You know, University of Minnesota is like 50,000 students or something like that. Science and engineering, smaller again, and like the material science and engineering major was again like 60 something students, and you've even got your friend group inside of that. It's so easy to put yourself in these little pockets where you're comfortable and you're not really, you know, pushing yourself. And I think that NOBE was extremely, extremely helpful in, you know, creating those bridges across schools, even within your university. You know, just making those connections. And I'll make a plug too for if anyone has the opportunity to go to the national conference. Those things are an amazing opportunity. I remember I went to the one in McGill in 2014. You know, met some of the executive board members and all that, and it was just an awesome experience to be able to meet people from the other universities who are working towards the same things that you are. I'm going a little long. I'll spend a couple minutes quickly here on just Target in general too, and then I'll get a little bit more into what I do specifically. So for those who don't know, maybe up in McGill, Target is a U.S. retailer who they sell, you know, a lot of clothing, apparel, hard goods, shoes, electronics, you know, just a large retailer. And we compete directly with a lot of different companies like Home Depot, like Walmart, and like Amazon. And it's a crowded space. And, you know, there's been tons of articles about retail is dying. Everyone's just shopping at Amazon. You know, no one goes to stores anymore. And so it's been really interesting from my perspective, being an engineer, to still be able to sort of see what's going on with how Target as a company has, you know, adapted to that challenge that retail is dying and has found its place among the Amazons and Walmarts of the world. You know, because when you look at a Walmart, you're never going to get cheaper prices, you know, than Walmart for the most part. Like they've got like scale that it's just crazy how big Walmart is worldwide and in the US. And then in terms of Amazon, you know, the breadth of selection that they can offer in terms of what they can offer on their site, how fast they can get it out, the network of distribution centers and things like that they have, that's difficult to compete with. So sort of where Target fits into that is that we're also sort of like a discount retailer, similar to both of those companies, but Target has been able to find a niche as more of like an upscale discount retailer. If you know, if that, it's a little bit of an oxymoron, but that's what Target is. It's tries to be, it's the like Target is what some people like try to refer to it as, which I think is a little funny. You know, those people I think are drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, but the goal is to make it so the experience at Target is that much better than at a Walmart, and at an Amazon. You know, between customer service and then just your experience in the store, locations of the stores. Like one of Target's big pushes and some of you may have seen it too by your campuses, is that Target's opening a lot of these small stores close to universities and in city areas, urban areas, to try to help cater to those customers. And Target calls them guests, cater to those guests, and have like a localized assortment, and have like friendly people there who want to be there. For the most part, not everyone wants to. Everyone's got days where they don't want to be at work, but try to really be different than Walmart and Amazon, because like I said, it's going to be next to impossible to compete with Walmart on price. It's going to be next to impossible to compete with Amazon breadth of selection, and for them price too, to some extent. So Target's really tried to find its place there where it can still succeed. And it's the stock prices for the most part gone up. Had a hard last quarter. Results weren't too bad, but if you don't meet what the street wants, then it's going to be a bad day. But in my opinion, it's been a pretty successful strategy in sort of going against those articles that say retail is dying. There's still Target stores opening every year. Yeah, and that's a little bit of a background on Target too, sort of where it fits into the retail landscape. A little bit about NOBE as well. And I'm not sure if I can't see a little chat box or anything with questions, but if people do have questions, feel free to interrupt, or otherwise we can get to them at the end. All right, I got my notes here. Sorry. So some of the things I wanted to speak about tonight in general were sort of how business and engineering come together in the corporate world, and I thought that I could talk about a few points. One was cross-functional teams, which I mentioned before. Another is catering a message to your audience as someone with a technical role, or if you're in the business side, a business role, catering what you have to say to a technical audience. So I've been on both sides of that. And then just sort of balancing goals with a business justification, because often in my role, I'll want to do one thing, and the business is, from a quality standpoint, like I want to improve this product, and the business is like, oh, that adds an extra whatever, 25 cents to the product. That's a lot of difference. How can you justify that? So those would sort of be the big three points I want to speak to. So the first one is just part of a cross-functional team, and this is where I think NOBE gives a lot of great background. A cross-functional team is effectively a team that's from a lot of different disciplines within the company. So at Target, that includes me as a product safety quality assurance engineer. There's a merchant. They're the ones who sort of pick which products are going to be for sale. There's a sourcing manager. After the merchant chooses what products they want, the sourcing manager finds where it's going to come from and how much they're going to pay for it. Then there's packaging, there's finance, there's logistics. I mean, like the whole cross-functional team gets huge. Usually the core cross-functional team is about like 5 or 6 or so people. Product development, I didn't mention them, but that's another huge piece. NOBE's really helped me prepare for those conversations, because it, as I mentioned before, it helps you realize that you all are sort of working towards a common goal, and all of what you're doing is going to intersect at these meetings. And an example might be the best way to sort of explain this. So let's say you got a cell phone you're developing. The merchant is looking at their planogram. They say, hey, I want these cell phones. Then the sourcing manager says, okay, you want these cell phones? I'm going to go around to China, South Korea, Japan, wherever it is, US, find that cell phone for a good price. Then I come in, raise my hand, and say, okay, we're going to get this cell phone. From my technical role, I'll say what regulations pertain to the cell phone. What do we have to make sure that we're checking for and testing for? Is that factory, going to be adequate to produce that cell phone for us? Is it going to meet the target expectations for quality? Packaging says, how do you want to package this? And everyone sort of does their piece. Product development works with the supplier that sourcing picks. and then works its way through. Yeah, and then that process just sort of works its way along from beginning to end, and everyone's working together from the business and the technical roles to get something from just an idea in the merchant's head or on some vendor's showroom floor to a finished product that you can buy at Target. And then after the fact too, my role will work with those teams on if anybody leaves, pardon me, a review on target.com or calls in, whatever it is, to help sort of iterate that design and improve on it, and how costs and all that works into that. And I realized too, as I was going through that, I didn't really do a very good job of explaining exactly what I do at Target. So I'll take a step back really quickly and just spend a minute on sort of what my role is. As a quality assurance, product safety and quality assurance engineer at Target, my job is pretty much just to ensure that products can meet regulations that are in place coming into the US for sale in the US. And then the Target brand products have another special sort of process that we have. And so I basically manage that process from selecting whether or not Target can be the importer for the product, to what factory it's going to be made in, to pre-production discussions with factories, to product testing, to product inspections, making sure it actually looks like what we want it to. Then all the way to the guest feedback piece, where something is for sale for however long. We get some reviews on target.com. I keep an eye on those, and if there are issues that we have to improve on something, whether it's next year or whatever, the next cycle that's going to set in store, then I work with the cross-functional team and any of our suppliers to make sure that those corrections are made. And specifically at Target 2, I work on seasonal products. So that's like the Halloween stuff, the Christmas stuff, Easter, Valentine's Day, New Year's, like any of that sort of thing. So if you're at Target and any of it sucks, you can let me know, send me an email. So that's, sorry for that little bit of out of order piece. But so I've covered a little bit about what I do then and the cross-functional team piece. I'll speak now to sort of like the tailoring your message to your audience. And I think that that's something that's kind of, especially if you're in a technical major, like if you're in engineering or science, it's kind of hard to keep mind of this, especially when you're in school. Because I know when I was a student at the U of M, we would give these presentations and they would be very geared towards your peers. You would, you'd research all these papers, you make sure you have your work cited, you have your PowerPoint, you stand up in front of your class, in front of your professors with your, like the one suit you own, speak to everybody, be very down in the weeds in the details, going through like every step of the mechanism or every component of the diagram, whatever it is. But when you get to the corporate world, if you do that, no one's going to care really what you're saying. They're going to hear what you say maybe for the first like 3 seconds, and then they're going to like look back down at their phones and more or less ignore you until you're done, and they ask you again, like, so what do you want from me? So it's something that's hard to keep in mind when you're a student, but I think that it's something that's extremely important when you get to the corporate world. And again, another plug for NOBE is that I think that when you have some of these speakers come in that your chapters host, they may be presenting to you like a technical piece that they're gearing more towards like the academic student audience, or they may be presenting like a business case or something like that, and they realize they have more engineers in the audience, so they'll try to gear it that way. You really have to think and understand who you're speaking to make sure you don't speak below them, you don't speak over their heads, you try not to bore them with too many details, so that's not really what they care about. And sometimes it helps you do additional research too, if you know that they're going to be interested in a certain piece. Like, let's say I have to try and convince the team of sourcing managers that I want them to increase the glass envelope size, the thickness of the glass bulb for the Target Christmas lights. I can come in there with all these diagrams about how these are shipping and some potential damages that we're having, and all these different technical reasons, like we have to improve the whatever performance of it. And I could have all these details, and the sourcing managers are going to focus in on that one little slide that says prices will go up 12%. And then they're going to say like, no, I'm not really feeling this. So when you're going into that, what you can try to do is do some more background research on, what on the cost piece of it, and try to layer in whatever technical message you have with that, so you don't really lose them. You can say, yes, there will be a 12% cost increase, but shifting to this increased glass thickness will reduce our damages by X%. It will save us X dollars a year, and we'll have this return on investment, and we'll improve the quality of the product. And at the same time, we're going to reduce the overall cost, which then our vendors will pass on to us, and then everybody will be happy. So really trying to understand who your audience is, and tailor to them, to that piece. All right, I'll move along to the balancing the goals piece as well. Balancing like your technical goals, or for me, my quality goals with the business. And then I'll finish off just sort of with some more specifics on my job, on like what happens basically when things go wrong, in case anybody thinks that'd be interesting. And I'll try to finish around 6:30, a little bit after. I think that's what we're shooting for. And then if there's any questions, we can cover that as well. So the balancing goals with the business justification it's pretty similar, I guess, to what I was speaking about with tailoring your message to your audience, and that you'll have ideas or goals from your perspective and your role, whether it's the technical or the business role. And I'll try to approach this from both sides, because I know I'm an engineer myself, so I tend to approach things more from that side. But there are times where I'll want to do something for a product, and I won't be able to have that business justification that it's going to really be better for us in the short term. Like, I don't have the numbers behind it that this is for sure going to be, from a straight dollars and cents side, the greatest thing to do. It might be more of like a long-term investment, or like more of a difficult to quantify piece. Like, say for example, I have a product and it's breaking. Say it's a chair and the leg breaks. I want to increase the thickness of the chair, of the legs, or change the material of whatever wood is being used, to reduce and eliminate, if possible, those complaints that the chair leg is breaking. So I know that when I go to a cross-functional team meeting and ask them to make a change, it's going to cost money. They're going to ask me, so how many complaints is this really? Is this actually a problem? Is anybody getting hurt? Is, all these different questions for me to not, push me off of what I'm trying to do, but kind of push me off what I'm trying to do. They have their goals too. If, from their perspective, I'm this guy who's coming in, asking them to make all these technical specifications to their product based on what I'm seeing. And it may be that we've only received 3 complaints in a month or something like that. We've sold however many thousands of these things. Is it really that big of a deal? And from my perspective, it's like, yeah, I understand that point too. But, if someone buys a chair and it falls and they hurt themselves, they're one that could be, there's the liability of someone hurting themselves, which is never anything that we want. But then two, there's what I like to call the brand reputation, Target's reputation. If you buy something at Target and it sucks, people might not even necessarily complain about it. They just won't come back and buy it anymore, or they just won't shop at Target anymore. They'll post a bad review on Target.com, whatever it is. It's going to, it may be difficult to exactly quantify exactly what that costs, but if you have a lost customer and they tell their family and then their family tells their friends and all that, then it could really balloon up. So you have to try and explain whatever goals you have using as much data and justification as you have. Obviously, the best way, in my opinion, to really get things done is to have solid metrics behind it, to have solid data behind it to make your point. If you have the business justification to convince the business team of what you want, you should definitely do that. But sometimes you may also need to think about a little bit more outside the box to try and convince those people of why you want to do something a certain way. And each company is going to be different. There may be companies where if you don't have that business justification, you shouldn't even bother. That's the way they do business. That's it. There also may be companies where, depending, like they might not be very big on data. They might feel more like, oh, they get like a 1-star review on their product and it's like the worst thing in the world. They couldn't care how many they sell. It's more emotionally decision driven. So it sort of combines a few of the pieces I've spoken to, just sort of understanding what your goal is. A big piece is understanding what, I won't say your opposition's goal is, but what the others on your team's goals are, and try to find as many commonalities as you can to really work through those pieces so everybody can get to a place where they feel comfortable to move forward. And of course, there are sometimes in my role times where nobody's really, there's something where I'm just basically coming in and saying like, this is a product we can't sell anymore because of XYZ, and everybody hates me. But sometimes that's my job. We get 20 guest complaints for something in like a week that this thing's falling apart. We can't sell this thing anymore. It's a piece of garbage. And then there's always a discussion on like finding the root cause of that and all that. And that's one piece I didn't really mention that I do as part of my job as well. Is work with a lot of our external partners, a lot of our external vendors. Matt mentioned that I get to travel overseas to factories and things like that for Target, but like work to really understand like what the root cause of some of these things are. And I know I'm at 6:29 already. I'll try to go really quickly through this last piece, just sort of run through what sort of things I do in terms of my role, and if there are different failures or things like that. I think Matt's saying take your time, so you'll get to hear me ramble on a little bit more here. So I mentioned a little bit before about what I do in terms of each step along the process, but I can walk you through a little bit about sort of what a corrective action looks like and all the different teams across Target that could be involved in that. So I'll do something that's, pretty straightforward. Let's say we have a product for sale and it doesn't have the appropriate label on it. You see your little choking warning on the side of things. Let's say that for somehow something snuck through and we had a product that was for sale that had the choking warning missing and we had to remove it from sale. So if that was the case, that would sort of start me looking pretty far back to like the very beginning of our process and figuring out like where to try to identify what the true root cause of this issue was. Like we can take an immediate corrective action, remove it from the floor, but then you also really want to be able to dig into that root cause of why did this happen in the first place. You get your corrective action of solving it here and now to alleviate the stress, and then you have your preventative action as well to try and make sure that this does not happen in the future. So let's use that example. Let's say we got, the choking hazards for children's products. Let's say we got I'll use my phone again. Baby's first cell phone doesn't have the appropriate warnings on it, and we have to remove baby's first cell phone from the shelf. So first thing I would do is I would go to see, what product testing we have for that product, because a product testing report should have all the appropriate labels and things on there. So, and usually whenever I tell the cross-functional team something's got to be removed from the floor, everything I'm doing, whether it's as I'm going or sort of a summary at the end, has got to be communicated to the broader team, to the merchants, to the sourcing managers, because they're really going to be upset of, why are you pulling this thing off our floor? I'm losing sales. I paid all this money for it. We're going to have empty shelves and disappoint the guests. What's the justification for you pulling this? So let's say I go back and review the test report, which is the first place that I would go. I would look and see, okay, this is all passing testing. This has the appropriate labels here on the test report. That's weird that it's not here on the product. So then I go to the inspection report and I say, this passed the inspections as well. Why did it pass inspections if it doesn't have the appropriate labeling? Trying to still unravel that. And usually I'll pass that sort of information on to whoever I'm immediately working with on the cross-functional team. Usually at that point for removal, it's the merchant. They want to be as up-to-date as possible, because they're probably going to have to find something to either find extra inventory to fill that hole on the sales floor, or find something new to replace it with as soon as they can. Obviously going through all the appropriate quality and safety checks. So I'll go through and try to figure that out. So it's strange. This is past testing. This is past inspections. What's going on here? And that brings up an interesting point to quality assurance in general, especially a desk quality assurance job like mine, is that you can only look at so many products. And so if we're making 100,000 babies' first cell phones, we're not going to inspect and test for at least to the testing protocol, official testing protocol, 100,000 babies' first cell phones. In the factory itself, they may do some sort of testing, some safety electrical testing on every single phone that comes out. But in terms of the target retailer's testing program, it probably won't be all 100,000 phones being sent off to some third-party lab for testing. And when we send in one of our target inspectors on our China team or on our India team, wherever they are, they're not going to sit down and look through all 100,000. They're going to take a statistically significant sample to look through and do that inspection. So keeping those sort of things in mind, it seems like this vendor might be up to some funny business. It's strange that the testing and inspections here are all passing, but then when we get these things on the floor, something's not quite right. So what I'll go back and do is I'll look at our factory assessment that we do. And the factory assessment is just sort of an overall quality check for factories that Target works with. Target doesn't own any factories. We use third-party vendors, and they have relationships with factories that produce our things. But in order to produce anything, they have to meet these certain quality requirements. And I'll go back and see, it looks like they met all their minimum requirements, but they had some, room for improvement on following through on corrective action plans and understanding all of, and understanding some of the regulations potentially surrounding some of their products. Maybe they understood they're a factory that's great at, I don't know, baby's first TV, but baby's first cell phones are newer to them, and so they're not as up on those. So they had those places for improvement. So seeing that, it's like, that's interesting. Then I ask the suppliers with either through my overseas team or directly with either through my overseas team or directly through the vendor or the factory in China, send me your internal inspection reports. So then they'll send those to me, and I'll say, that's interesting. This actually failed because a lot of these phones didn't have the appropriate labeling on them. And so it's like, but some of them did, some of them didn't. It seemed like it was done inconsistently. So then that starts to sort of fit a few of these puzzle pieces together on, they failed the inspection, their own internal inspection, where they look at probably more than Target is going to because the vendors they're the ones in the factories. They're the ones who are there for the direct oversight of production. Target does our piece, but we're not there 100% of the time. And then the factory assessment, it showed this factory has a little bit of trouble with following up on corrective actions. So then I ask, so is there a corrective action plan in place for this product, for these missing labels? And they're like, yeah, there was one, but we didn't really. I mean, like, I think we did something about it, but I don't know if anybody really checked. I think the guy in warehousing said that he had them added, and we thought we were good. So not a whole lot of follow up there. So now in my head, I'm starting to realize, okay, this is interesting. The root cause is becoming a little bit more clear, and that this vendor struggles to execute any sort of corrective action plans that they put into place, and they don't really do very much follow up. They just sort of take the word of some person who stops by and tells them what they want to hear. So that sort of then leads into me formalizing the plan that I'm going to communicate out to my cross-functional team and telling them that why this phone is being removed and how it's not going to be removed again. Because that's usually something that the cross-functional team is going to want to understand too, is, okay, fine, we got to remove this now. I don't want you to come back and tell me in 2 months that this has got to be removed again. And so you want to make sure that preventative piece is there too. So sort of going through some of the steps, and I skimmed over some things and oversimplified. But the root cause appears to be that this vendor was inconsistently putting labels on the products that they need, and not following up on their corrective action. The immediate corrective action for these phones was that we had to remove them from the floor. The preventative action is that I'm going to work with this supplier and work with this factory to create a more robust corrective action plan and make sure they really understand these label requirements for their phone, for the baby's first phone that they're producing, and how important that is. And usually suppliers will realize how important something is when you pull it off the floor, and then all the merchants and sourcing managers, they'll be mad at me for a little while, but then once it's all done, they get really mad at the suppliers that screwed up, that dropped the ball. And then we'll start that development cycle over again on, depending on what the failure is. For a labeling thing, it might be easy enough to pull them off the floor, put the appropriate labels on, and get them back out for sale once that's done. It might be something more significant where it's got to be removed and destroyed. It could go to a recall, like a full-on recall, where the U.S. government is involved, the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Those are never very much fun if you end up involved in one of those. Yeah, there could be a lot of different things that go on, and everything I spoke to today, the tailoring your messages, the working as part of a cross-functional team, the trying to make sure your goals are understood, and you can make sure that they're executed on, all that plays through, and all of that ties back to, the value of NOBE, and the fact that you're able to be part of an organization that's teaching you early on when you're in school that business and engineering has to be, they are like like this, like they are totally together and inseparable. And if you try to approach business without the technical piece, if you're in a role that has that sort of interaction, you're not going to get very far. And if you're in a technical role and try to get very far without bringing the business along, you're also not going to get very far. It doesn't work. So being able to network with like-minded individuals, being able to attend all these awesome events that your chapters are able to host and put on, even just doing things like taking part of like the stock market game, just like being part of that community really helps prepare you and put you in that mindset. It helps you understand some of the important things that you will need to understand when you do enter the corporate world. Yeah, and I think that's all I've got. I don't know if there are any additional questions from anybody, but I know I can leave my email or phone number too if anybody's got any follow-up questions after that.
Thanks, Will. And I've been monitoring the chat as well, so if anyone does have questions, feel free to add those questions there. I really liked, Will, how you kind of ended there and kind of talking about how business and engineering are so important in today's workforce, right? Um, Having those skills is extremely valuable, and we see it time and time again. And there's not always a lot of people who have those kind of merging of skills, right? You have some people who are very technical, and some people are sometimes business minded. But we find that a very valuable skill is kind of having that cross between business and engineering. Um, so I see that too in my day to day job, and I see how valuable that is. Um, One last thing that I want to ask you, Will, maybe to give some of your advice. We have a lot of students, who are kind of looking at companies right now, maybe Target, maybe other large companies, sometimes startups. Um, and there's a lot of there's going to be a lot of interviews, I think, coming up here for students.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in terms of kind of like the job environment and getting a job in today's world, right? What kind of recommendations do you have for some of these students to kind of land a job, or to more importantly get the job that they're looking for?
Yeah, so I think one piece of advice that really helped me too when I was um, looking for a job is making sure to the best extent you can apply for that job individually. Don't use try not to use like one totally generic resume and one totally generic cover letter when you're doing things. A lot of the time, and I could speak for Target, when the job descriptions are put together, they're partially written by the directors who are hiring for that job. And so if you're able to tailor your message to what they're looking for and try and match as many of your skills to some of the things that they're looking for, use some of the same words in your resume, be able to speak to some of the qualifications you have that they're looking for from that piece of it, and really make them feel like you're committed to wanting that job and you're not just sort of phoning it in. You're saying the same thing to 8 other companies that you're interviewing with. I think that hiring managers and technical managers really can tell when you're phoning it in and when you really genuinely want it. And so I guess that I would put the effort in to really get to understand every job that you're applying to as much as you can. Understand that you're not going to write a whole brand new resume and cover letter for each one, but try to personalize it for each one. Um, and then just trying to speak to some of the points that they're looking for, and make yourself as make sure you point out all the qualifications that you have that align with that job.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense, right? In that, I know, like when we recruit too, you can clearly see when people are using the same resume, over and over again. You need to
Mm-hmm.
really tailor your message to each company. And employers aren't stupid, right? They know you're going to be applying to many places. That's part of the process. But making sure that you really are giving a unique message will really resonate with the employers. So I completely agree with that point. We are just about at time here. We got just a minute, so I think I'm just gonna wrap things up, and wanted to thank you, Will. We really appreciate your discussion today, discussing here with NOBE and the wider community. To those listening, we would like to invite anyone who's kind of listening as well to the alumni board, either now or in the future. Depending on where you are. Feel free to reach out. You can go to the NOBE National website and reach out that way. Otherwise, we might be able to leave some links on the YouTube as well, possibly. And we're looking for future speakers as well. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. And the third webinar should be coming up in the next month or two. You'll hear more about that. So we invite you to share that with your chapters when that becomes available. So with that, I think we'll just wrap things up. Thanks, Will, for discussing today, and I hope everyone has a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. See ya.